Hi guys, Rita here. Welcome to my YouTube channel where I review African literature. So I understand it's been a while, but today I'm going to review a book which really stood out for me for the last couple months. I've not been reading that much, but this one kind of got me out of the funk, and that is Harare Voices and Beyond, and this is by Chatora, and this is actually his third novel. I've reviewed his other two novels, and I'll tag them below so that you kind of know more about the author. He's quite a good author, Zimbabwean author. And this one, if I'm being honest, this one so far has been the best out of all his books for me. I really enjoyed the plot twist. There were so many aha moments and so many gasps and sighs when I was reading this, which I like because I like a book which takes me through. Like I don't like knowing what's going to happen, because with some stories you kind of have an idea, but with this one I had no idea what was going on, and I really enjoyed it. So this book takes place in Zimbabwe and in the UK, and I'll read the synopsis so that you kind of get a feel, and then I'll get more into the themes and the topics, and really show you guys how much of a masterpiece this is. So the synopsis: a drunken confession exposes a dark family secret. Reese appears to have it all. A white Zimbabwean living in affluent Borodale Brook area. He gets involved in a freak traffic accident. Therein unfolds a confession which unleashes a cathartic chain of events in the family's hitherto well choreographed life. A family whose lived experience becomes microcosmic and an eye-opener to Zimbabwe's seemingly closed, forgotten white minority community. Through offering a rare insight into the lives of the white community in post-independent Zimbabwe, Harare Voices and Beyond explores the dynamics of love, money, family feuds, identity politics, forced philanthropy, and respectability inter alia. Two families' lives are inexorably linked in this fast-paced narrative, which not only traverses multiple locations but also juxtaposes and the seedy underbelly of Harare with the leafy northern suburbs, and little-known Marina Thompson from UK Durham University all appear linked in a drama-infused finale that will shock and numb the reader. And that is actually true. The finale, for me, I did not see it coming, but I'll tell you more about it. I'll try as much as I can not to spoil it for you, so I'll just do major topics so that, you know, at least you look forward to reading the book without me spoiling it for you. So to know more about the author, obviously, Chatora is a Zimbabwean novelist, essayist, and short story writer based in Bicester, England. He grew up in Mutare, Zimbabwe, and moved to England in 2002. His debut novella, Diaspora Dreams, which came out in 2021, was approvingly received and nominated for the National Arts Merit Awards, that's NAMA, in Zimbabwe in 2022. His second book, Where the Heart Is, was published in the same year to considerable acclaim. Chatora's forthcoming book, Born Here But Not in My Name, is a brave, humorous, and psychologically penetrating portrait of post-Brexit Britain. Chatora is noted for his acerbic and honest depictions of the migrant experience, heavily influenced by his own experience as a Black English teacher in the United Kingdom. Chatora probes multicultural relationships, identity politics, blackness, migration, citizenship, and nationhood. And that is actually true. I think he's one of the authors who really centers migration when it comes to writing, and I really appreciate that. As someone who's in the diaspora, some of the things that we face, he really portrays them in this book. So let's get into the book. I'll tell you the themes and the topics which really resonated with me and which really popped out, so that I don't spoil the book for you. Yeah. So the book starts with Reese and Doris, who are mother and son, being accused of killing the son, one of her sons, the youngest son, Gillian, and they are in prison. They're going to court, and we're kind of getting a glimpse of what exactly they're being accused of and what happens. So in this book, the main characters, the mother, we have Reese, we have Gillian, and then we have a girl called Marina. We have other traffickers in there who are also involved in it. So with their own voices, they get to tell you how exactly they took part. At first you would think, okay, these are just random characters, but as time goes on, it all links up, which is something that I like, because I'm the kind of person who likes, I don't like being told how the story is going. I like kind of figuring it out by myself and also being shown. So this really helped me to enjoy this book in the way that it was crafted, because at the end I was just like, wow, I did not see that coming, and you really hit that very well. I really appreciated that. So each character, they get to tell you how they were involved in what happened to Gillian, because he's the one who's dead, and how exactly the mother and the brother are linked to his death. So in essence, that's the story. So who done it and what happened, kind of thing. And then as you go through the motions, you kind of understand, then you link everything, and all of those themes that all come together. So number one of the major topics in this book is racism, and the white people in Zimbabwe, being the minority, they were faced with racism, especially from the government, when the Land Reform Act was imposed. I think it's the Land Reform, if I'm not thinking the one in 1960 something. I hope it's correct, I'll look it up. But that's when the farmers were told to leave all their farms, and they were taken over by government officials, or they were given to other people, black Zimbabweans, if I should say. And some of them, they were not experienced at all. So most white farmers, they were told to leave the farms, to leave the lives that they've known for so long, and they had to look for other ways to fend for themselves. So some of them, they ended up fleeing the country. Some of them ended up moving to the city, like to the boroughs, like Borodale, which is the suburbs. So in this book, we see that the effects of that, how it affected the main characters in this book, and how it trickled down to them now, being where they are. One of them is dead, and the other one is like engrossed in proper like drug activities and all of that. So it really opened my eyes to see that, you know, how this actually acted out and how it affected people. Because when it happened, I was quite young and I never really thought much about it. Having been born in Zimbabwe and spending more than half of my life in Zimbabwe, it never really crossed my mind. Also because I was never really exposed to it, because when I was growing up, rarely did we see white people where I lived. And it's not that I did not have access to them. I did. We could go to like Semi-Levy village and all of that, but they were not really within my community where I used to live. So I never really got to interact quite a lot with them. So now that I'm reading this book, it really opened my eyes to see how the minorities in Zimbabwe were affected by this, and how, you know, it really some of them actually died, some of them were killed because of that, because of how the government acted out of anger and sometimes misinformation. Some of them, they resorted to violence, and some people actually ended up dying. So it was actually an eye-opener for me to see this, and I'm very grateful that, you know, Andrew had the courage to write something about this, and for us as black Zimbabweans, or black people, African people, to see it from this perspective. So racism is really talked about in this book, and also how they're called slurs. I was never aware of that. I did not know, to be honest. And so yeah, that was quite eye-opening. So racism is one of the main themes to look up in this book when you're reading. You actually don't have to look it up. It actually comes up, and then you're like, oh, okay, so this is what's going on. This what was happening. So yeah, definitely. The other topic that comes out in the book is filial bond. So that's like a parental bond between mother and child. And we see how the filial bond between Gillian and Doris, the mother, is fractured. It's really bad. And also it's because Gillian was going through a lot. He was abusing drugs. The death of his father really affected him. So I can understand from that perspective how he felt that kind of way. And the mom, she appeared to favor the older son because he seemed to be the reasonable one, until you find out what he did, until you find out what kind of a person he actually was. Because I think even in real life, it's very easy to blame the one who seems to like maybe drinks a lot or goes out a lot, or who's not very conventional, if I should say. Someone who doesn't do things as people are expected to do. So Gillian, he was more outgoing, more free, if I should say, and it backfired in a way. So it was very easy for them to blame him for, all the bad things that was happening. They were saying it's your fault, this is happening, this kind of thing, you're very irresponsible. But you could understand from his point of view what was going on, how he could not express his emotions. So he was using alcohol abuse and drug abuse to numb that and just to go about life. So their bond was fractured because of that. But even from when they were young, I think she preferred the older son. So I think that's what was going on, and I think it happens in real life where the firstborn is preferred more than the others. Not all the time, but sometimes it happens. That's how I was viewing this anyway. So we see how that is fractured and how it affects Gillian as he grows up and as he has his own family and everything. And we also see the filial bond with Marina, who's the other main character, who's also involved in this, and her mom. Since she was young, she never really got along with her mom until she had to go to a girls' school, where she had to leave there. I think it was pretty much an orphanage, if I'm not mistaken. I think so, but it was more of like she ended up being separated with her mom because her mom was not taking responsibility at all, and she seemed not to like her at all. So that also was a factor which played in how this how the characters' lives were structured, because it started from a very young age. And I think sometimes people don't realize that what happens when you're young, it affects the course of your life sometimes, and then in the end we have like childhood trauma, which you kind of now have to fix and deal with when you're older. And some people, they use so many different ways to escape that. So I think that was going on, that's what was going on in this, but it was more to highlight how the characters ended up the way they are. And I really enjoyed that, you kind of had to trace it back, because sometimes writers, they just write that someone is bad or they're going through this, but they never really give an explanation as to why. And as much as the parents, the mothers were not solely to blame for it, but you understand and get a better view of how they ended up doing that. So yeah, filial bond is one of the major topics which was covered by the author. Number 3, we have sexual abuse and assault. So this one, it happened both from a man and a woman, and it was quite eye-opening, because the way it happened to a man, most people would just brush over it, but it was very, very sad to see those kind of things happening to people. So we have Marina, who ends up being sexually assaulted by someone who adopted her, and it really left a sour taste in my mouth, because I was like, she was very excited to finally go to a loving family, and then this happens, and then she gets blamed for that. Like, why did you let that happen? And I've heard of cases where when someone is abused or a child is abused, it's the child who gets blamed, but no one looks at the person who's done that. And I think that's something that is very wrong. And I cannot really understand how people get to the conclusion of blaming a child. Sometimes, what were they wearing? What were they doing? But it's a child. I personally don't understand it, why people end up blaming children for this kind of things when they're leaving the grown adult there saying they were tempted. I don't know, it makes no sense to me. But that's what happened to Marina in this case, and you kind of see how her life spirals from there, how she has trust issues, abandonment issues, and all of that. And we also see how one of the guys in the story, I think it's Mira's, who put it, I forgot the name, but he's one of the guys who was also involved in the drug syndicate, and he was told that for him to be initiated or for him to get in, he had to sleep with the boss. The boss's name, I think, is Brian Watson. You get to know him later on, and he wasn't even aware that's what was going to happen. He thought they were just going to be doing like deals and stuff, until he found out that he was literally in the middle of this, and then he was just assaulted, without knowing. And the thing is, his journey of recovering and realizing that was not as apparent, if I should say. It was not as obvious, because I think it also showed how men and women showcase the emotions when it comes to abuse and how they express it. Because with Marina, you could see it how, as a character, she was kind of explaining it, and also from the author's point of view. So I think it also showed how men and women handle these things and how they move on from it. Because with the guy, it's something that he just glozed over and then he just moved on from there. So you can see that it was a very touchy topic for him, which I do understand it should be. But I think it also portrays how men and women actually deal with emotions when this kind of things happen. And it really popped out to the extent that I was like, oh, okay, this is something to really think about, because it really gave the characters a bit of personality, which is very good when you're writing characters, because you don't want characters who don't have personality, characters who are just numb. You want characters who are complex, who will give you the good and the bad. And I think this was really covered very well. So number 4, we see how corruption was at the center of what drove most of the youth into getting into this drug syndicate. So as you read the book, you see that most of the people involved in this are younger people. I think the ones at the top are the only ones who are way older, but the others, the rest, they're all young people straight out of university, looking for jobs, early 20s, mid 20s, and it shows how corruption has, in our country, in most countries, but I'm talking specifically about Zimbabwe, being a Zimbabwean, how corruption has actually driven so many people through to the wrong path. They're now using drugs because they just want to numb everything that's going on around them. There's no employment, there's nothing, so the only way to survive is scamming and corruption. And it's such a sad reality, but that's what is going on. And it seems like these characters, that's what they were left to do. And it's such an eye-opener, because that's actually reality. That's what's going on. There's nothing. Our governments, they're failing us. People are trying to do so many things. People are trying to venture off in doing some things which they are very, very good at, but they don't have ways of doing it. They don't have the funds or the equipment or the work to support that. So most of them, they're going for drugs, where either they're buying or selling. Buying because you just want to numb everything, selling because you need to survive. So it was actually a very harsh reality to face that. That's what's going on in our country. And as Zimbabweans, it's very scary to talk about politics, to be honest, given I'm outside of the country, but still you can see the fear that I have talking about this kind of things, which is quite sad, really, because I might be miles away, but I still have family there. And this is such a fear that stays in us. So you can imagine now people who are on the ground, what they go through, and then how they end up resorting to things like drugs. So the author really covered that very well, because it shows you how corruption and I would say this is the outer thing, how then it affects everything else that goes on into the characters' lives. Right? So last but not least, number 5, we have therapy. So the reason why this is amongst the major topics for me, there are so many other topics, but for me, these are the ones that stood out. Therapy was how we got into Gillian's head and how we got to know him more as a character. So he was going to see a therapist, and through that, we got to see his journey, how he started, failed marriage, kids, and everything, divorce. And we see that how that affects him through therapy, which was something I've never really seen in not in African literature, but in books by Zimbabweans, especially from a man's point of view, how a man goes to therapy and is being told this, and he's expressing himself. Obviously, he doesn't have the tools to do that, because as soon as he becomes vulnerable, he's tempted to go back to what he's used to doing, because there's a sense of comfort there. So I was really taken back by how the therapist was actually taking through the journey, asking questions, and through that's how we get to know more of what was happening through Gillian's point of view of what was happening. As much as he was dead, at least we could know and understand now what happened and how he actually died, and if it was because of the mother and the son, if they murdered his son, if they murdered him or not. I'll leave that to you to find out in the book. But it really, it was a very nice way of writing a story through therapy, and then the person being the therapist. She was a white lady married to a black man, and you kind of see the dynamic of that, how it happens in Zimbabwe, interracial couples in Zimbabwe, and how they support each other in a sense, and how the husband, I think, if the husband's perspective on racism, on how he's treated by the white people in his wife's circle, that actually spoke volumes on all these different dynamics. Because you could fall in love with someone from a different race, but at the same time you're still going to meet obstacles just as the same as when you're married to someone of the same race. But I think with interracial couples, there's that element of racism there. So I think you, as a reader, you get to see and explore that through the therapist's eyes, and how exactly it affected her, being a white Zimbabwean married to a black man, her circle, what they were thinking about, and then how they treated her husband, how the husband was treating the wife's circle, and all of that. So that was a very interesting dynamic to see unfold in everything that was happening. But other than that, I think this is a book to get, and the cover is a brilliant cover. I really love the cover. It has two covers. This is the paperback, and there's a hardcover which is yellow with the same lady, but I think she's in black. I had it's somewhere, but I just moved, so everything is all over the place. But definitely do go and read the book, you guys, and support Zimbabwean authors. You know, we're doing our best to create stories for people to read, for people to know more about Zimbabwe. And I think this is also a learning curve, because this is my first time reading about the land reform for farmers in a Zimbabwean fictional book. So this is very educational from that front. There's education to educate you on white Zimbabweans, what they go through and everything that happens in the country, the drug syndicate. For me, I was just like, oh wow, you would not believe the people involved. And because I just watched the Gold Mafia series, I think for me that's why I was into it, because I was like, oh, this is what happens and all of that. So do get yourself a copy, and I will leave the other videos about his books below, because I've reviewed his other two books, and he seems to be releasing a book every year, which I really admire, because as a writer I've been struggling. I think my book is a year old, was a year old yesterday, and I've not even started on writing anything at all. So I really appreciate, and I really am envious of Andrew, because each and every single year he has a book out. I think I need to take a note from that. So thank you so much, you guys, for watching. I know it's been a long time. I really appreciate your patience, your kindness, and everything that you're doing. I pray you have a blessed week, and see you another time. Bye.